I was held hostage 4 times myself.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Not because I was stupid. I don't think so.
You've processed this, because I don't know how you can smile about that, because I think I would be traumatized for a long time.
I was doing domestic violence intervention, and the first time that I got held hostage was with a man named Sam. I couldn't call the police in because there wasn't enough time. He was bigger than me. I couldn't throw my body at his feet. Only thing I could do is talk and bond. Then he came into my personal space, put the scissors to my throat.
Oh, geez.
And I put my hands on his arm, and that was the moment I think changed everything.
Hello and welcome back to the Starting Over podcast. This is episode 123, and I've got to say it is so standout. The guest on the podcast is none other than George Kohlrieser. He is an organizational and clinical psychologist. He's a distinguished professor of leadership and organizational behavior at a top business school, IMD, over here in Lausanne, Switzerland. He is a frequent speaker at management and professional conferences around the world, including the World Business Forum, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. He focuses in particular on high-performance leadership, high-performance teamwork, conflict management, change management, coaching, stress management, and personal and professional development. Now, as you might have heard in the introduction, he has also been held hostage, and this was in the context of George himself being a hostage negotiator. And what he shares with us are some of the lessons that he learned through his experience as a world-renowned hostage negotiator, and translates that into how we can become impactful and inspiring leaders. Now, some of the themes that we discuss on the episode are: how can we indeed become a more impactful and inspiring leader? What are some of the key qualities and traits that we should all attempt to cultivate if we want to achieve excellence? We also discuss authenticity, opening up emotionally, even when you don't know how. We discuss whether fear is an effective leadership strategy. We discuss what are the simple tactics, for example, that hostage negotiators use that you can adopt and use yourself in a business context. This is overall such an inspiring episode, and I hope you do listen all the way through and leave a rating or review if you did indeed enjoy it. But with no further ado, here is my episode with George. George, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Starting Over podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you, and such a pleasure to be doing this in person, given I do so many remote interviews. It's like, yes, real human connection.
I was excited to hear you were coming.
So great. Where I want to start is actually with the man that you are today, but tracing back to some earlier roots. It's a part where people don't often go, and there is a point in time, I find, and it often arises through conflict, through difficulties or hardships, where people pause and start asking themselves, how did I get here? Or what has made me the person I am today? Why am I making these kind of choices in my life? So where I want to start with you, George, is what are some of the experiences that you had in your earlier years that have made you the man you are today?
Well, I think growing up on a farm in Ohio, in the U.S., in near Dayton, Ohio, actually in an old Indian village area, Wapakoneta, and that was a German Catholic family, and it was a good, solid life. It was a secure base. And my father, who had lost his father when he was a young boy, did not really know how to be a father. So I grew up with a lot of discipline, German structure, and not a lot of affection. But he did love me, and we did do things together to show that love. So I had that foundation. That was a secure base. But the shock was when I left to go to a Catholic seminary, a boarding school, when I was 12, to study to be a Catholic priest. And I spent 10 years in the Catholic seminary, never became ordained. But that was a shock to leave that security of a home and be able to find a way in that school with 268 kids. And it was a challenge because my birthday is in November, so everything was done by order of birth. So I was at the end
the
of
young
the
one.
sequence, yeah.
Yes.
But I learned to emancipate early. That was a blessing and also a problem because it makes you too independent, and that's been the struggle.
Too independent.
Yeah.
Proving, what are you trying to prove by doing that?
Well, that you can do it on your own. You don't rely on people. You don't need secure bases, which is a big mistake. You know, I teach leadership, and we have to have secure bases. We have to learn to follow. We have to learn to be interdependent. So when you become independent early, emancipate early, then you don't often develop the skills for interdependence.
No.
If we understand leadership as a relationship, negotiation is a relationship. Many people, especially men, do not know how to be in a relationship.
No. No, and I suppose in your lifetime, would you say that you have witnessed a development in that area in terms of men being more, or it being more acceptable for them to be emotionally available, present?
Absolutely. I mean, the model of men today, and there's a struggle to define what masculinity is for many men. It's changed. Fathers are more caring towards children in general. But there's another factor. Many grew up without a father, single family, divorced family, and so they don't really have the model of how to be a man. And they will often take themselves as not being able to be affectionate, not be able to show people around them compassion and caring. We see leaders handicapped because they don't know what caring is. And if you haven't been cared about by a mother, a father, a grandfather, grandmother, teacher, coach, somewhere along the line, you're sort of hung out there to pull yourself by the boots.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that as you've gotten older, you have softened, as the work that you've done in yourself, that has allowed you to take off some armor that you probably had to have on in those earlier years, being so independent and so forth?
Absolutely. And I had a great line of teachers, starting with Carl Rogers, through Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, through Stan Groff, through many, many other, Eva Reich. These were just a few. And I needed therapy to really open up my emotions because I was a bit detached. I was always social. I was always able to connect, but not at a deeper level, not with emotional availability. So I became authentic by going through therapy and going through all these training experience. And the transformative experience, Shannon, was when I became a hostage negotiator in the early 70s. That was a very special thing, starting with learning how to connect, how to really bond, how to listen to people's pain.
How do you go from supposedly being on track to becoming a priest to then becoming a hostage negotiator? Because as far as careers go, I don't think that's a usual one.
Well, if we count chapters as parts of careers, I've had many. I've been very blessed because my goal was to be a mediator. And as a mediator, when I got my degree, I had a chance to work with the local police department. And they were just setting up a hostage negotiation process, but mostly through community policing. Those were the early days of before they became so militaristic in police, where community policing was a force. And so I had that opportunity to step into that. So I've had many, many experiences being a CEO of a methadone clinic, being involved in a mental health center, working with a hotline for suicide prevention, helping handicapped people through Goodwill with a recreation program, as well as taking on the role of a professor.
Yeah. Many different hats, it sounds like. But go to the hostage negotiation. That intrigues me a lot because you're embroiled in conflictual situations. And from that, I would think, are there just some people that you absolutely cannot negotiate with?
No, you can negotiate with everybody, but you may not be able to do it. Their potential is there. So in physical hostage taking, there are 3 steps. First, you create a bond. You have to emotionally link. Then you listen to the pain points. Happy people don't take hostages. So there's a pain point. And then, or pain points, and then concession making. What do you think the success rate is of hostage negotiators as measured by the FBI and by Interpol here in Europe? And these are standing
expressed
statistics.
as a percentage.
Once the hostage negotiator enters the situation, no further major injuries or deaths are involved.
I would think quite high.
0 to 100%.
75?
It's 95%.
95%.
That was the major link when I realized what was happening.
Wow.
It's leadership. It's how to influence. And hostage negotiators succeed by not command and control. They don't tell the hostage taker, now you have to come out or we're going to send the SWAT team in. You give choice. You ask the right questions. You build a relationship. Help them understand how their loss is something they can get over, how they can have hope for the future.
Wow. What a training in leadership, if there ever was one. It makes me think of something that Brené Brown is a leader that I admire a lot. She speaks a lot about the importance of empathy, of vulnerability. I think both of those things are absolutely integral to
and shame.
And shame, actually. Yeah, yes. And she said, she's worked with all sorts of people from C-suite down to factory workers. And she said, we often construe the leader to be the person who's in the C-suite or the person who has shoulder pads or pinstripe suits. And she says it's far from the truth. For her, a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for people and processes, encourages other people to express their own or their full potential by exploring their own first, by being that model and that example.
Well, that's exactly correct, because everybody's a leader. And when does leadership start? As a child. So a child who knows their desire and they cry, they're leading themselves. Now, we don't call that leadership, but then as they go through the different ages, 6, 7, they know their desires.
Yeah.
In hostage negotiation, the first thing you do after the bond is know what the person wants, the desire. The 5% where it doesn't work, they don't have a desire. And that's a very negative sign for police suicide by cop, where they do something stupid to get themselves killed by the police. So one of the first things is to know your desire, how to be able to put words to it and express it. And desires are connected to emotions. So if you have meaning and purpose and passion, it has more emotion. And so leaders have to be able to feel their desires, be emotionally available, and be able to influence themselves, first of all, and then influence others. Leading self, leading others.
Tell me what you think about this idea. So I had been reading recently about a distinction between a leader who seeks to shine and a leader who seeks to radiate. But the distinction was somebody who shines is much more driven by ego. It's much more their own self-importance, and they want to influence often by control or fear-based tactics or mechanisms. And it's often fueled by an unconscious desire. Unconscious desire is probably linked to this stuff in childhood, which people don't want to talk about very much, versus a leader who radiates, who is grounded and rooted in their own authenticity. They've probably done this work to become self-aware and seek to share that in a way that naturally influences or inspires other people as a consequence of what they've done on themselves.
We call that person effect. Discovered by Pavlov way back in the 1700s, working with dogs. But he ignored it, didn't want to deal with it. But we now know there is a person effect. Up to 80% is nonverbal. It's when you meet somebody and you naturally trust them, you naturally like them. And then there's people you, sort of doubt. You don't quite trust them, but then you get to know them and you do trust them. And then those that you just don't trust at all. So the person effect is very powerful. Leaders have to be able to communicate interest in others. And that's why the way hostage negotiators succeed is not telling people what they should do. not telling them to come out, but giving them choice, asking questions. One of the big mistakes leaders make is they don't ask questions. Be interested in others rather than be interested in yourself.
Interesting. I think I'm in a good profession here asking questions. That's what I do for a living. So something for you, George, you say one of the most important parts of leadership is building trust. That's integral for you, and you say it's through that trust that you've created which then inspires people to bring out the very best in themselves. Can you elaborate on that idea and why it's so important to build trust?
Trust is creating psychological safety. So the brain in our mindset has a part that pays attention to something all the time. And the brain is fundamentally wired to be negative, to look for danger, to survive. Now, you can't live that way. You'll die prematurely. You have to be able to go from being negative to positive, survival to thriving. And so it starts with being able to manage that internal state. Secure basis, psychological safety, shuts the brain's orientation towards looking for danger and pain to survive, shuts it down, and then you become creative. You become playful. You see opportunities. You see the beauty of life, beauty in yourself. What destroys that is mindset, how people think, negativity, emotions. If you're carrying grief or loss that you never got over it, you're feeling like a victim, you're complaining, you're negative. It destroys the ability to see the beauty around you, even the beauty in yourself.
On a personal level, George, how have you lived that in your life? Because you lost your son. Was he 23 years old? It was unexpected.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a horrific thing. I think anyone who's a parent can't imagine losing their own child. And yet it would be so understandable for you to be angry at life, angry at frustrated, at not understanding. How do you process that?
Yeah. Well, I was certain he was going to survive. He was in an accident, lived 5 days. He wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to be a trauma doctor, already working at the hospital, and was right in front of the hospital where he was hit by a truck. And he was in a coma for 5 days. I was sure he's going to survive. That moment when I realized he wasn't was the deepest moment of pain in my life.
Yeah.
And I lost trust in God. I would say that is part of life, but I had been in the seminary for 10 years studying to be a Catholic priest, and I thought God owed me that. And it took me 2 years to come back and reconcile. And I'm a deep believer. I renewed my bonding to God. But how I managed was through secure bases. People like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, my family, teachers, friends, people I knew around me. We cannot grieve alone. We have to grieve in a tribe, in a family. So being able to express that, I cried a lot. I got a lot of anger out. I got out fear. You can't control it. As a father, you want to control it, and you can't. All these emotions I had to resolve, and I had to help along the way to do that.
Something that I have been thinking about recently is how to release anger in a safe way, because I think a lot of people have repressed anger, and it's a really difficult emotion to deal with. I think people even scare themselves. They don't want to open up the can of that. How can I handle this fire? And I think we go about our lives trying to control that, and of course there are moments where you can't, and that bubbles up. But it's not something you go and do in a typical therapy room, right? You don't go and see a counselor and then all of a sudden start throwing stuff at the wall. So I mean, at least I think not. So how do you actually go about that?
It shows up in leaders by emotional triggers. How many leaders are impatient? How many leaders get upset, suddenly have an amygdala hijack, and they feel...
I get it with my son all the time.
They do and say things they later regret.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to manage those emotions. Emotions are very important. Descartes made a big mistake. Well, maybe not a mistake, but certainly a different orientation. We are not thinking beings who happen to feel. We are feeling beings who happen to think. And this is behavioral economics in action. Emotions precede cognitive activity.
Yes.
So if you block your emotions, you block the connection to be able to bond. And bonding is one of the main reasons leaders fail. Not connecting in a way. They maybe talk too much, they may be too cold, they may be too distant. You have to be emotionally available to bond. So that takes us to the whole area of grief. What are the losses? In our high-performance leadership program, which we've been doing for 20 years, over 180 classes with over 60 in a class, filled for almost a year in advance, we teach them to understand what happened to them in their life and how it affects their leadership. If they had a divorce, if they had a problem as a teenager, they were bullied. If as a child they had physical abuse or emotional abuse, or there were other traumas, they have to understand how that has an impact on their leadership. And it does. It's a big link, but it's a very important one, often ignored in leadership development.
I can imagine so. Because if I was thinking of what a standard leadership course would be, you would assume it would be a whole lot of theory and how that applies in a professional setting, not actually the invitation to look at one's own past.
Shannon, they come wanting to know tricks and little tools to be able to lead better. But the key is this. We don't use cases except for one, themselves. What unravels their internal barriers? What holds them back? We call this being a hostage, a psychological hostage. So there are physical hostages, and hopefully none of you ever are a physical hostage. However, there's also psychological hostages to a boss, to a colleague, to a situation, the COVID, for example, and to spouses or kids in personal life. And then there is hostage to yourself. If you are filled with regret, anger, shame, thousands of internal negative states, you are a hostage to yourself. The whole idea is, and using the same techniques as we do in hostage negotiation to get that 95% success rate, can be used to free yourself from hostage taking of external stimuli or internal.
I want you to tell me a story about a particular hostage negotiation situation that you had that you didn't think would, well, maybe let's say you thought it could be one of the 5% that doesn't work, but it did. What happened?
I was held hostage 4 times myself.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Not because I was stupid. I don't think so.
You've processed this, because I don't know how you can smile about that, because I think I would be traumatized for a long time.
I was doing domestic violence intervention, and this was as hostage negotiation was just developing. And there was an experimental project to try to reduce homicides in families. We knew that 35% of all homicides were committed in families or with people who knew each other. So the idea was, and I was just getting out of graduate school with my PhD in mediation, work with the police. When they go into a crisis situation, we would go in together. If it was deemed safe or if the people would cooperate, mediation would be used. Well, I was on the job for a very short time, and the first time that I got held hostage was with a man named Sam. I was riding with a lieutenant. We got a call that there was a hostage taking at a local hospital. Rushing to the scene, the area had been secured. He was, as lieutenant, the top commander on duty at that point, so he became the incident commander. His idea was no violence, no kicking the door in, no tear gas. We're in a hospital emergency room, and there was a man named Sam who was inside holding a nurse with a scissors. That was the last the doctor saw. So I'm feeling safe standing behind him, and he goes around the room once, goes around again, and then he turns around and says, "George, how would you like to do that?" Talk about social pressure, because all the police officers were watching. Does he have it?
Wow.
Is he up to this? So I said yes. Being an old farm boy, why not take a risk?
How old were you?
I was then 24.
Wow.
And
Talk
so
about dropped in the deep end.
I did get in the room, but he was really psychotic, out of his mind with emotion, with rage, holding his scissors to Sheila's throat, threatening to kill her, kill me, kill everybody he could. Within a very short time, before I had a chance to do much of anything or say anything, he cut her throat. Not the jugular, but on the side. Bleeding severely, she screamed, "My kids, my kids, my kids."
Oh, no.
Falling to the floor. He was startled. Now he comes around the table, and he comes towards me with that scissors. What do you say with someone who says they're going to kill you, shouting and screaming? I couldn't call the police in. There wasn't enough time.
Who was in the room?
Me, Sam, and Sheila.
That's it.
That was it. I couldn't call the police in because there wasn't enough time. He was bigger than me. I couldn't throw my body at his feet. Only thing I could do is talk and bond. Then he came into my personal space, put the scissors to my throat.
Oh, jeez.
And I put my hands on his arm, and that was the moment I think changed everything. He felt my caring. And I was interested. It wasn't focused on the scissors. I was focused on Sam. And within a short time, I asked the question, "Sam, how do you want your children to remember you?" Screaming, he says, "Don't talk about my kids. I'll kill them too," etc., etc., etc. That was the beginning of the dialogue. Within 10 minutes, the first request, "Will you let Sheila go? She's injured. She needs help. You're a father. I'm a father." And he left her go. Within 20 minutes, he agreed. "If you agree to give up cooperatively, I will go to the judge and say you did so, and you can maybe get your sentence reduced. You're going to go to prison, no question about that, but I think I can help you get it reduced. I will tell the kids you did it because you love them." And that was the very reason he went to the house against a court order. And the police were called because he tried to break in, and he should not have been there, and the wife stabbed him. And then lastly, I will come to the prison, and I'll help in a reconciliation. And he bought that deal. Now, we had to get him out of there. He had the scissors. He had committed a felony. He couldn't go out with that scissors. Question, "Sam, will you give me the scissors, or you want to throw it on the floor?" See, hostage negotiators always use questions. Give choice. Give choice. Second question, "Sam, do you want to be handcuffed by me or by the police?" "I'd like you to do it, George." "Do you want to be handcuffed in the front or in the back?" 3 questions. They empower him. And he said in the front. And so I cuffed him, and we walked out safely.
Wow. The choice element, because the examples you just gave there, you only gave 2 options. Is that part of the strategy?
You can use more. 2 is probably the clear way, if it's clear that it's 2, but maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4. Okay. But you give choice. This is what leaders have to learn. Command and control does not work. Command and control is dead. The command and control leader is a dinosaur, but many don't know it because it creates threat, it creates fear, it creates a sense of powerlessness. We need a workforce that's engaged, feeling psychologically safe to really do what they are trained or what they want to do.
Yeah. And yet it seems entirely logical because people are going to be more motivated when they have more meaning, belonging, purpose, when they are following somebody who is an inspired and inspiring leader.
Of course
it's just logical. Like common sense, no?
It is common sense. But the problem is most people, what happened to them? You know, how many of us have said to somebody, "You're too sensitive, you're crazy, what's wrong with you?" Rather than saying what happened to you. Most grew up with a father or a mother who was command and control, telling them always what to do, not respecting their choices, not being able to create clear boundaries. Or they imitated a boss who seemed to be successful and get results through fear. You can get results through fear, but it's unsustainable.
Yes.
The whole climate of leadership has changed.
Agreed. There is a... I don't know whether you did that on purpose there, but you said the shift between that question of not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you. There is a book by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey that was released a couple of years ago. And it's so great. I read that, it touched me. It's very much linked to this work on self-awareness. Yeah. And it releases shame. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so powerful, because we're not aware of all of the ways that we have actually stored shame through the comments that we either receive from our parents or from teachers or from kids on the schoolyard that have made their mark, that we actually assume we're all these big grown-ups going about our daily life, but actually we're, in many respects, we're not. Right?
And the leaders have to understand that. He wrote that book with Oprah Winfrey. There's another very good psychiatrist, Gabor Mate. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
Gabor Mate.
The myth of normal.
Goes in the same direction. If you don't say no, if you don't recognize your desires, your body will respond.
Will say no. Did that ever happen to you?
Yes, when I was trying to get out of the seminary, I was ambivalent about leaving after 10 years, feeling I had a vocation, and I developed migraine headaches like you couldn't believe. They were paralyzing. I would be in bed for 24 hours. So they sent me to the hospital, and one of the priests who came to see me, who was a spiritual guidance counselor, said to me, "George, you don't have to be a priest. You have choice." It was like a bolt of lightning out of the sky. You have choice. Interesting, within 6 months, I didn't have a headache since.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible.
Mind-body connection. It's unbelievable. I mean, I've done so many of these interviews now, and that comes up so many times. I think my very first interview was somebody, a doctor, who realized she didn't want to be a doctor anymore. Insomnia, but debilitating insomnia. And then she left the profession, followed a different path that she felt was more of a calling for her. Completely gone right away.
Yeah.
Remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
George, for you, what are 3 qualities of an excellent leader?
Number 1, they create bonding. They connect, and they're emotionally available. That connection of emotional availability means that you not only attach, but you bond with emotion. Number 2 is you become a secure base, and you allow trust to develop. And number 3, you're good at dialogue, talking. So many leaders talk too much. So many leaders don't answer questions. They block the dialogue. Negotiation training is done by helping the negotiator talk clearly, directly, crisply. So those 3 things are very, very important. Actually, there's a 4th, which is mindset. Get your mindset on playing to win rather than playing not to lose. Risk taking. You have to take risks. You have to fail.
Yes. I've struggled with that one a lot. I think many people are, but the fear of failure, I realize you end up producing what you're afraid of. That's a huge irony.
Yeah.
I was so afraid of failing in so many areas of my life that it brought in so much unnecessary stress, and then I didn't dare to do things.
Yeah. Which is the name of my second book, Care to Dare. The first one, Hostage at the Table, is how hostage negotiation techniques can be used in leadership. And then the second one was Care to Dare.
Yes.
How to be a secure base, how to build trust. Using care to shut down the brain's orientation to look for danger in order to dare, be creative, be innovative, etc.
What I love about that is the idea that you have to do the inner work first. It's the inner work which will then influence the outer. And it's a contrary approach to what most people assume, because I think we assume, okay, I need to learn these particular tools, strategies, techniques. I need to have this kind of knowledge, and that is going to make me, follow the path that I want to. But I'm hearing it's a bit more start with you first.
Yeah, leading self. That's why everybody's a leader. Everybody leads themselves. Everybody has to know what their desires are. Everybody has to know how to negotiate, how to be interdependent, how to make a concession, how to insist on something. Many people don't know that. So lead others. You lead yourself first, and then you lead others. Mm-hmm. And then you lead organizations.
How amenable do you think people are that you work with to this idea that they need to become more caring, and that will make them more effective?
In our groups over the years, and we've had over 8,000 people go through, in the beginning, there was a lot of resistance. And then people got it, and they started encouraging other people to come. people in their organization, their boss, etc. And so now when people come, they're much more open because somebody recommended. 80% come because somebody recommends it. So they may resist it when especially they have to deal with emotion, but that's why we use small coaching groups where psychological safety is felt, confidentiality is respected, and people open up and share what's inside, what happened to them in their life. The stories people carry are enormous, and the effects on their leadership become very clear.
Such powerful work.
Yeah.
And it's not just reserved for one area of life either.
Yeah.
Like, it's clear that is going to help you become a more effective leader. But
you know who tells us first in the changes? Spouses.
True.
What happened?
You're gonna get them all signing people up now.
What did you do with my husband? Why is he so open? Why does he talk about putting the fish on the table? Why does he want to dialogue about conflict? He was never that way before.
Wow. So the questions master that you are, George, what are some of the questions that you ask aspiring or already established leaders to in these settings to open them up and to become more caring?
What happened to you? What triggers do you have? You're afraid to make a decision. Where did that start? Were you as a child encouraged to take risks, to fail? If you have a problem with aggression, where did that start? Was your father aggressive? Was your mother aggressive, or a grandfather? Who taught you how to be a woman, how to be a man, how to deal with your emotions? So you get them to think about the impact on their leadership. And I love to deal with aggressive people who come and say, George, I've been told I got to come and talk to you. You're supposed to coach me, but I'll tell you from the get-go, I was born aggressive. I'm aggressive now, and I'm going to die aggressive. I love these people because they have passion. They just have to understand their aggression is getting in the way of their success. If they want success, however they define it, then changing that aggression, it becomes important. They can change personality. We all know the need to change personality. Triggers become a part of the personality, their states. And we know now more than ever how you can actually manage fearfulness. People who are anxious, who worry all the time. Stop worrying. Give up the sense of control. People who are carrying depression. You can get over depression. No loss is too great to get over. If they have anger, they're impatient, they're frustrated, get out of that position and change the way you see the world, starting with mindset, then the bonding, doing the grief, release the emotions, and then create a social network around you based on secure bases and trust. And a secure base is not just people. It's having a home, it's a country, it's a place, it's a symbol, it's all kinds of things.
I would like you to break down this idea of secure bases more, because you've mentioned it a lot, but it's quite conceptual. So maybe you could explain, okay, well, what does that mean in a practical sense as well?
Good question. A secure base is a person, a place, a thing, a goal, can be many things. That gives a sense of protection and a source of energy and comfort. That's the first part. Second part is that when that happens, then the person can take risks, seek change, and explore. The goal of life is not safety. The goal of life is to experience the adventure of life, experience the beauty of life, to be able to take chances, to be able to fail. And if you feel safe, you can do that. And if you feel you have to control everything, one of the big problems is people who feel they have to control everything. Well, the fact is you can't control everything. And how to let go of that desire to control everything. Trust yourself, trust life, and secure bases around you that you'll deal with whatever comes.
So is it then important then to work first on the secure base element so that you can experience the other things that you're mentioning, like the adventure, the joy that can be engaged in with, because there is that safety first?
Yeah, but it first starts with bonding. Did you attach and have a bond with a mother, a father, a grandmother, grandfather, a teacher, a stepfather, who doesn't matter so much who, it does, but was there a secure base? There has to be that bonding. Mm-hmm. And then out of that bonding, you develop the ability to trust.
Yeah.
But bonding comes first, then comes the trust.
Yeah. Can we bond with ourselves in any way?
Well, that's a very good question. Yes. You accepting part of yourself. You have to ultimately become a secure base to yourself, but not ever without external secure bases. We always, till the day you die, need external secure bases. And we call it confidence. If you have a mother, a father, a grandfather, a teacher, someone who taught you how to believe in yourself, how to trust yourself, then you become a secure base. Mm-hmm. You have confidence. And people who have so much anxiety, so much fear, so much worry, they're not a secure base to themselves. And probably they didn't have secure bases as they grew up. No. We are naturally oriented towards the negative until we have someone to teach us how to be positive. Being happy, being positive is a choice. Leaders have to be positive.
I love that idea. And it's actually, in some ways, it's quite controversial. Because if you tell people, no, happiness is a choice, I imagine there's a plethora of responses which are, you don't know what I have been through.
You don't know what I've been through.
You don't understand my life.
Then what's the next question?
I don't know, hostage negotiator, tell me.
Well, the next question is, what happened to you that you lost that?
Right.
What happened to you that you have so much pain? What's been the deepest loss? We ask this question to our leaders who come to the program. What has been the deepest loss, and what's its impact been on your leadership? And It can be all kinds of things. It can be, as a young MBA, I was humiliated in front of a CEO for my presentation and my boss didn't back me up. It can be the suicide of a friend. It can be the death of a mother or father. It can be all kinds of losses that are affecting their behavior. Moving too often, so I just stopped attaching. Being adopted, going to a boarding school. I mean, it's endless. What is the loss that affects your leadership?
Mm-hmm. What I'm finding very interesting, so I work as a coach in the public speaking space, and there are so many themes that you're mentioning that come up even in what I do, and you realize that it like I said, it transcends. It's just the essence, right? But what I've realized is we all seek to be authentic. We don't know how. And many of us don't know how. And part of the work is removing the masks. It's almost like a process of unlearning, I find.
That's a very good question. How do you know when you're authentic?
How do you know? It is a good question.
Yeah.
Because it's going to shift depending on
how do you know? How would you answer that?
How do I know?
When you're being authentic.
I often have a clue as to how I feel afterwards. Uh-huh. So there's a sense of, let's say I go out and I am in a work meeting and I'm with several people, irrespective of the conversation that unfolds. When I leave that room, I am grounded in a sense of integrity. Like that was a right approach. So you know by an internal feeling. I usually know by an internal feeling, yeah.
The other way is when you are not authentic. You know you're not authentic, and that's a sign that you have to do something to be authentic.
But that's still an internal feeling, is it not?
It is an internal feeling, but it can also be an external behavior. When you're not saying what you want to say, when you create a false self or a false image. The problem is when you think that's your real image, your authentic image. But authenticity is absolutely important. Leaders have to be authentic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole false self element, that goes into the pathology, does it not? I mean, what you probably experienced as a hostage negotiator, where somebody perceives themselves in a certain way that's entirely removed from their true self, probably because the shame or whatever is so overwhelming that they can't go there.
Because of grief. What triggers that is grief or loss.
Yes.
And it manifests itself in anger. It manifests itself in fear or in sadness of the primary emotions.
Did you ever witness probably in the hostage negotiation setting more than the leadership, but where somebody's constructed almost a delusional reality Because the sense of loss is so great?
Believe
I'm
me,
hearing a story.
believe me, I have listened to garbage and conspiracy theories, psychotic behavior that is just it's crazy. Normally we'd call it crazy. And yet I have to accept it. I don't agree, but I have to accept it. I had a very paranoid man.
Okay.
They couldn't get out of that house. He thought his brain was wired by the FBI. He thought
His brain was wired by the
FBI.
okay.
He closed all the blinds, turned his television set around. I mean, he was truly paranoid to the extreme.
Yes.
And I managed to get into the house to talk to him and be able to listen to his paranoia. And how I got in is to say, look, if you think your mind is wired by the FBI, maybe I can help get it unwired. Let me start by looking at your toaster. What's going on with your toaster? And he was curious. And pretty soon we sat down and we started talking. And I got him then to be able to cooperate. I didn't change his mind. He still had all, but I got him to cooperate to go to a hospital, get some medication.
Wow. Toaster. Good thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
Wow, you have lived a life, George. You have lived a life with so many good stories to tell, I'm sure. I'm going to move into the final fast few questions now.
Okay.
And the
Well,
first
we
thing,
could talk forever here.
I actually could talk to you forever, but, I respect your time. So, first question, what is some of the best advice that you have personally received?
The best advice is you always have choice. That was a very powerful moment to realize I have choice. And you don't have to be a hostage. Even if you have a gun to your head, you don't have to feel like a hostage. Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, but he speaks reconciliation and forgiveness. So you have choice. The second piece of advice is say what you have to say clearly. And I had some real experts in communication. Kohlreiser was beautiful. He could look at you and go, mm-hmm. And that was a transaction. It would move you deeply. And how to put words to what you want to say clearly. Most people talk too much. They don't ask enough questions. They do all kinds of things rather than answer a question. And so their dialogue is crazy. Leaders have to be excellent. And the third thing is to know what you want. Know what you want. And I was fortunate in that. I grew up in my family where I was the oldest son. So I had a little bit of an advantage as the oldest child. But knowing what I want, my parents would ask me. They wouldn't always agree. There was consequences to what I would say. But that's that. Know what you want.
Yes.
Be able to say it clearly and crispy, and be able to never, ever be a hostage.
Never. Powerful advice there. And from a public speaking coach here, expressed in 3 distinct parts. I mean, you're a pro.
Yeah.
Second, what is something that you have had to unlearn in your life that has led to a big transformation?
I would say how to get in touch with my emotions. I went through many different types of therapy, bioenergetics, meditation, all kinds of activities to get in touch with your emotion. And the emotion that was most difficult for me to reach was sadness and learning how to cry. I was born in a family, very strong family, but boys didn't cry. They never quite explicitly said that, but I knew that was the way. So I had to learn how to cry, how to recognize when I am hurt. Because when you're hurt, the tendency is to activate the amygdala, so you hurt others.
Exactly. And me as a woman, both a wife, a mother of a son, I appreciate deeply when men are in touch with their emotions. Yeah. I connect, I bond, all the things that you're saying, it's key to love.
One of the most beautiful things is to watch men be loving to their children.
Yes.
Be loving to their spouse. And then be loving to their employees. be able to show interest in their employees, to create that bonding as opposed to being a poker player, ice cold heart, etc.
Fully agree. Final question and final words here, George. What is something you would suggest for people who perhaps recognize that they need to open up a little bit more, don't know where to start, but are convinced by the importance of doing so?
Well, if their leader, come to HPL. Our high performance leadership deals with that. No trait training, working on yourself. Next, get a coach, get a therapist, get professional help to organize how what happened to you has affected the way you are in a relationship. And it shows up in very subtle ways. People who have a person effective not smiling enough, being able to speak. You know the statistics. People are more afraid to speak than to die.
Exactly. I think it's a Jerry Seinfeld quote about you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. Exactly.
Yeah. So get professional help, but be able to cry. Be able to express your emotions. And again, when emotions pent up, it's very important. There is no such thing as a negative emotion. Every emotion, whether it's evolutionary, like fear of spiders or heights, or past experiences, has a purpose that person feels is important to them. There are destructive emotions. We distinguish between negative and destructive. There are destructive because people will do all kinds of road rage and you name it with emotions. But in and of itself, emotions are energy. And depressed energy, depressed emotion, overcharged energy can, if not dealt with correctly, can also create a problem. So how to get your emotions and use your emotions to seek the adventure of life. It is truly an adventure to be alive. Mm-hmm. There's so much beauty around. But people who are grieving, people who are blocked emotionally, they don't feel love. No. They don't feel joy. Mm-hmm. And joy is a very special emotion where people become afraid of the letdown feeling after you have happiness or joy. You need a goal, generally. There's some people who feel joy just being alive. That's a kind of advanced state to be in. But most people need something that they feel good about. But then there's a letdown feeling until you get to the next goal. You have to learn to like that letdown feeling and endure that while you work for another goal.
Mm-hmm. Or you have to work on that next stage, the joy of being alive, which is, that's the real, where it really is at.
That's where it's really at.
Life is an adventure to be lived, not a problem to be solved.
Wow.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
George, such a pleasure speaking with you. Your wisdom, your stories, your openness, touched me deeply. And I'm sure all the people listening too. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, Shannon.